Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host Shelly Lewis, and today we have an exclusive interview on the Paradise Fires. I have two expert testimonies from retired fire captains John Lord and Matt, and we're going to examine their findings after their many hours of investigations. Some of the topics this 3 hours that we have together will be including dues, smart meters, and some of the forensics. So without further ado, welcome John, Lord, and Matt.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks. John, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name is John Lord, and I am a veteran of the fire service. I'm currently retired and have been retired for about 10 years and researching the truth very heavily during that whole interval. So I woke up somewhere around 2008, 2009 and started diving down rabbit holes.
Nice, we love that. Digging below the surface.
I also have a lot of experience working with the fire academy and the paramedic academy teaching. So
Wow.
about 20 years.
Wow, and your background is also military. You're a veteran.
I did 4 years in the Navy prior to getting trained as a paramedic.
Yeah, so you have a lot of medical background, a lot of medical expertise and how to save lives. And so you carried that with you into the firefighting.
Yes.
So thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Helping. Matt, could you share with the audience a little bit?
Yeah, my name's Matt. I'm a recently retired firefighter out of a Bay Area fire department where I served 30 years. My career started in 1985 when I went to work which was CDF, which is now CAL FIRE, in 85, and I've been working for the fire service ever since. In my career, I also became a paramedic, so I was a paramedic involved in hazmat and also helped out teaching academies. So that's what I've been doing. I started researching, going down rabbit holes since early 2000s when I read the book Creature from Jekyll Island, and then took off from there. So I came to realize that things are not really what we think they are.
We haven't been told the truth on so many things.
That's an understatement.
Exactly. Well, I'm so thankful you guys are my guests today on Down the Rabbit Hole. I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of give our audience a disclaimer of such, because we might have some people that on our radio show that are a little bit, fringy, or I just want to make sure that you guys could give kind of a disclaimer.
Thank you. The disclaimer I would like to make is I believe that the Earth is a sphere. I know we've been lied to about a lot of things, especially I don't believe everything NASA says, but I do believe it's spherical. I don't believe it's flat. So I just want to get that out there.
Absolutely. I totally appreciate that.
And yeah, my disclaimers, I have a couple here. I concur with Matt. My research has taken me the other way. And I've done extensive research on the hollow earth.
Right.
And I've already shared this with Michelle, so she knows.
Yeah.
And then a second disclaimer is that my views do not represent my fire department.
Right.
I have that level of experience and background, but
That's right.
I seriously doubt that anybody in my fire department is on the same page. So,
And I want to say the same thing, and that's the reason I'm not giving the department that I work for, just due to that.
Right on. Okay, so the views of the show do not represent our respective affiliations with any of the places we've worked. These are our own opinions, our own findings, our own conclusions. And one thing I think we can all agree on, whether or not we believe the Earth is a ball, a globe, a flat, a hollow, is that we've been lied to on so many levels, and we're just all going down this journey together. And not everybody comes to the same conclusions at the same time. And my ideas may change, 5 years from now, but the fact is we're trying to learn the truth. And so that's the whole point of the show, is we're digging below the surface and we're going deep. And so thank you guys so much for being here. I want to get right into the Paradise Fires, though. Okay. So, John, could you please tell us why the interest in the Paradise Fire?
Well, what happened is October 9th, 2017, when we experienced the Northern California fires and the Tubbs fire. Matt and I became aware of all these fires starting at once, and it was incredibly suspicious. We couldn't explain, there was no abnormal weather or anything that would have caused the fires to all start at once. So over the period of time when those fires were burning, there was great cause for alarm in terms of rate of spread and everything else. So I began researching what was going on with these fires. And what I came very quickly to see was not only was the number of starts and the rate of spread with these things highly unusual, is that there were so many anomalies with the fires that I started doing a deeper dig into it.
It's the exact same thing for me too. I think there was 178 fires between the group of counties. I forget how many counties, 5, 6 counties.
Yeah, 5 or 6 counties.
And I was listening to them all night long when it happened on my ham radio, and it was unbelievable. I mean, we've had high wind many times. We're high, like we had that night. The wind did come up, and it was howling at my house. But 178 fires, 10 fires, okay. 178 off the charts, off the charts, and it just felt that night like, oh my God, something's not right. It just felt like we were being attacked. That's how it seemed that night.
It always starts that way, huh, Matt? It starts with a bad feeling.
And literally where I live, I'm on the side of the mountain. I was looking out and I could actually see just a wall of red, the flames out over Santa Rosa, and I listened to the fire on radio, and with the fire crews, I listened to the fire march from Calistoga in just several hours all night long into Santa Rosa, crossing 6 lanes of 101 and burning down the Kmart.
Right.
And unlike anything that I've experienced in 33 years in the fire service, I was listening to the whole thing, so it was unbelievable.
Did it spook you in terms of, you said you've never really experienced anything like that. What was it specifically? Just the rate of...
Well, that fire in particular, but how many fires? I mean, there were crews that were given assignments and they couldn't go. There were fires that they had no one to dispatch to that night. I was listening to that. I mean, it was unbelievable. Wow. And then with the aftermath of actually going down and taking a look at the devastation, where you had melted steel I-beams amongst trees that were still standing, that stood out as,
Things
so
that
this
make
was
you
the
go,
Santa
huh?
Rosa fire, you're saying
We're
saw
talking
this.
about, yes,
So
this was the Santa Rosa, this was over a year
October
ago.
2017.
Yep.
So yeah, so we've been dealt up this set of circumstances more than once. So in July, we had the river fire and the ranch fire, which they ended up combining those two and calling them the Mendocino Complex.
Okay.
And usually they name a complex fire when the fires join together, which I don't really think that they did. But anyway, that's what they did. Mm-hmm. So they were burning from west to east.
Which is unusual.
No, that's.
Is it west, east to west is what happened in Paradise, right?
Right.
Okay.
But they were coming down on us like a freight train, and they went to evacuation for here.
Whoa, Lake County.
Okay, so we went to advisory, and I was already aware of the fire, so I was all ready to go. I had everything I was going to bring with me all packed up, and they very quickly went into mandatory evacuation. I talked with a few of my neighbors. I said, hey, they're going mandatory evacuation. Don't wait too long to get out. And I hit the road.
Wow.
So, very alarming. And I was actually unable to get back into my house for 5 days.
Really?
So, yeah.
So you're saying that the way the fires were, you recognized the same kind of pattern that you saw in Santa Rosa, as well as what you were seeing happening in Lake County. to the point? Or?
Yeah, there was some similarities, but I mean, it was just very threatening. To be involved like that and to understand that it could burn into the town that I live in, the community I live in.
Close to home.
Yeah, and actually could destroy the house.
Right.
So what happened is we did some research around those as well, and this kind of brings us up to current events, which is the Paradise Fire. And
Yeah.
talk.
So we saw some anomalies on the Tubbs fire, the one in Santa Rosa. We saw some anomalies that we had never seen before. We saw total destruction of structures and cars that were flipped upside down.
Wow.
Because the fire was so bad or the wind was so bad, flipped upside down, literally.
Wow.
A lot of evidence, a lot of photographic evidence of this, of cars flipped upside down on the Tubbs fire. First time I had ever seen anything like that in my career. And the structures were burned completely. To usually when a structure burns, I mean, usually we're there, so it's hard. But even if we're not there and a structure burns, there's usually not total destruction. These burned with high heat, higher heat than normal, it seemed like to me at the time, and to melt to twist the steel that was twisted. And so those were some of the anomalies we saw then. And while the steel was twisted and things were melted that take 2,700 degrees to melt, a lot of garbage cans were fine. Which
Really?
Yeah. So that was some of the first time we really noticed that, and a lot of the forest was still intact. So that was, it's kind of like, that seems kind of strange, but we kind of didn't really. We knew something was up, something was different, something, they didn't burn like they normally burn.
Right.
And then, and so we went up to Paradise to check that out because we knew something wasn't right from that one. And when we got up there, it confirmed even much more what we had seen in the
Really? So
Tubbs fire.
same patterns of anomalies where you have a 2,700 degree, maybe I don't want to throw this number out there, but an iron tub that's completely demolished, or granite countertops that are completely demolished, as opposed to like 1,700 degree forest fire. The heat temperatures weren't matching up.
Exactly.
And then you had like garbage cans that were just standing there that didn't
Exactly.
get incinerated at all.
I pretty much in the heavily damaged areas up in Paradise, every vehicle that we saw was total destruction. Total
Really?
destruction, rims burned. But
If you looked at one, you looked at them all.
Yes.
Because the burn patterns are so consistent from one car to another, completely destroyed. None of the combustible materials used to make that car, the fan belts, the radiator hoses, all the stuff under the hood, none
Got it.
of the combustible materials are left. They're gone. They're incinerated.
And these are cars that are parked. These aren't cars that were in the garage. I mean, those two suffered the same fate. But these are cars on the road, on the side of the road, in the road, that
In a driveway.
This forest fire
Wow.
burned down to nothing, or down to just the bare whatever was metal that hadn't melted. That was what was left.
Just like a skeleton.
It's skeleton, yes.
the vehicle.
Exactly.
Whoa.
So
It's crazy, and the melted glass is also unusual. Consistently, we found evidence where it had burned the rubber gasket or the adhesive that holds the windshield into the body, where that had failed and the windshield had kind of fallen inward across the top of where the dashboard would be, and the glass literally formed to the channeling around the windshield. So it didn't
Melted.
It didn't melt per se, but
Okay.
it got hot
Hot.
enough to distort.
Whoa.
And then there was some in the vehicles. I was able to see some evidence of molten glass in the vehicles,
Really?
but that was more common to where it took so much heat it just kind of
Kind of
formed.
warped it?
Yeah.
Warped it.
and all these subdivisions and communities that we came across in Paradise, a lot of them had some decent separation between them. And if all the canopy had been burned, if it had been total devastation throughout the forest, then it would have been easier to explain that, hey, this thing was just so hot, that's why everything burned the way it did. But the canopy never burned on this fire.
The canopy, you mean the trees, the tops of the
tops
trees.
of the trees, the tops of the trees. So, which on a good, real bad fire conditions, that's going to happen. A real hot forest fire, that's going to happen, and that didn't happen. So
On a real big, real hot fire, when the fire gets into the tree, okay, when it gets into the tree, normally the heat carries it upward. So we call that a crowning fire.
Okay.
So, and we were not seeing evidence of that. Remember that when we went up toward Magalia and we're looking at the canyon part where it burned?
yeah, by Pence.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did see some, we saw some serious anomalies. So we went up Pence Road and we were looking to the west on Pence Road before you get up towards Paradise. And it's a pretty steep gorge. Looking down, it looked like a normal forest fire, vegetation fire. You could see everything had burned like you would expect it to burn. But then when the plane we were on, the flat up above that we were on, everything that was burned, it was grass and trees and brush. All the brush was burned at the base, literally burned out at the base, and the roots were burned down. But the dry leaves on the manzanita were unburned. It was only burned at the base, and that's what we saw time and time again. All oak trees, all these trees were burned from the inside out.
Wow.
And that was just unusual. So it was almost like it looked like two different fires. The down in the gorge in the canyon, it looked like what you'd expect, a ripping normal fire. And then up above, where you had the fuels weren't as close together.
The thing that caught my attention when we were driving there is the fact that if my arm is a tree, is the fire concentration never got into the tree top.
Right.
So it was almost like it burned the mid-range part of the tree and left the crown alone.
Wow.
And that is highly unusual, because usually, with the heat rising, even if it's being driven by wind, it climbs into the crown real easily and then burns the entire tree.
But what you were saying is that you said it looked like just the trees were being burned from the inside out.
Being
What
burned
caused that?
from the base, burned from the base and burning down into the roots. I'll tell you the story about the one we saw at the school. So, we've never seen, if it was one tree that we had seen, that's weird. I wonder how that happened.
We probably looked at, 50 trees that happened to, Matt, up there?
At least lots and lots of trees. We had
It's just the ones we saw.
Wow. Let me check one thing. You guys keep talking.
So
Okay.
we went to Pearson Elementary School, and there was a large tree that was inside the blacktop. It probably had 60 feet plus at least all the way around it of pavement, of blacktop around it. It was cut off about a foot level high. All the exterior bark was fine. It was unburnt. It was, maybe 2 inches thick. Inside was completely burned out.
Wow.
So I have, how do you explain that? And I've heard, I saw a video trying to explain it gets into the roots. Well, the roots were unreachable due to the pavement that was over it. So that doesn't make any sense to me. So somehow these trees were burned really hot at the base, and that's where they got really, really hot. The other anomaly with a lot of these trees is some of them you'd have dry grass in the area or dry leaves on the ground that were unburned, and that was it's just unexplainable to me.
Yeah, the area we surveyed going up Skyway from Chico.
Yeah, well, the first
The
day.
totality of the destruction of fuels on the ground was like nothing I've ever seen, because these fires appear to be smart fires.
I like that term. I like that term.
And they're also very
term.
selective about what they burn.
Wow.
Okay, but the totality of the destruction, it left nothing. It was down to soil. So you would expect to find, pockets of pine needles and leaves and other organic debris, and we couldn't find any of that.
Wow.
I mean, it was just basically burned everything combustible all the way down to the native soil.
Really? So it's,
And this was a very large geographic area that I'm talking about. And then again, the
trees were burned at
destruction.
the base, and many of them were actually fallen over because and then you look and they're hollowed out from the burning at the base, and a lot of them created craters, 2 or 3 foot deep craters where they had burned out the whole root system of the tree,
Whoa.
the root ball of the tree.
Whoa.
Not just craters, but we got pictures of some where you can actually see where the roots
Yeah.
went down
Tunnels.
into the earth like tunnels, like gopher tunnels.
oh, you're kidding.
No. And there was no evidence of any charred wood inside those holes where the roots used to be.
So like it disintegrated them.
Almost just like it disintegrated them. I didn't see any ash in the ones that we looked at. I didn't see any charred wood.
Whoa.
They just were like literally gone.
Like uprooted, literally, without a trace.
Like somebody uprooted the tree almost and left a hollow there, without disrupting the soil.
Wow.
It was the most
Like it
bizarre thing I've ever seen. And the one of the other things is that Matt talked about this already, but we saw mature, probably scrub oak, Matt, and madrone trees.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking good-sized trees, right? So these madrone trees and these scrub oaks, where there was destruction of the trunk down near grade, and then the tree just kind of
Wow.
in all directions, and none of the branches were burned.
Whoa.
There was no indicators of any burning on any of the branches or the foliage,
So just the base of the tree.
just the base of the tree.
And like manzanita, it actually usually has several branches that go up. I saw several manzanita bushes, big ones, where they just, instead of it's all just down burned because the base had burned. So they
In
just
all
open up.
directions.
Wow.
Just like
So-
like an umbrella, an
Yeah.
open
Yeah.
umbrella
Interesting.
upside down. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you find, I was just briefly up there. We couldn't go into the main area. We were only able to go into, what is the name of that town? Where the dam
Chico?
is?
Oh.
Concow.
Concow.
I went there and we saw some trees that actually could still see the changing color of the leaves. So it felt like it was autumn up there, but then there on the base it was burned. Did you see that too?
Absolutely. So that was my point, is a lot of these burned at the base, and a lot of these leaves that they had, like manzanita, a lot of times, if it's a ground fire, that's going to cause
Highly
total
combustible.
devastation.
Highly combustible.
The
Right.
dead leaves, because a lot of
Right.
times in manzanita, they're still standing, half the branches are dead already, because that's just the life cycle of them, and half are still alive. And all the dead leaves were unburned. But at the base, it created a crater.
Wow.
So that's not typical fire behavior from a wildland or vegetation fire. That's just not the way that I've been on a lot of them, and I've never seen anything like it.
Wow.
So, and this example that we're giving with the trees, it wasn't just isolated areas. I mean, we saw it just repeatedly over a large geographical area that had been involved in the fire. So,
Well, could you talk about the guardrails that you saw up there? You mentioned it about the fire.
I have to backtrack a little bit
Okay.
to tell you about the guardrails. Okay, so the river fire burned over 175, which is Hopland Grade.
Okay.
And the ranch fire burned down Highway 20 from west going east.
Okay.
Okay. And it's probably a little better than a week or so after the fires were out and things kind of returned to somewhat normal. I had to go to Ukiah, actually down to Petaluma, and I was taking my old toolbox down to my son, so I didn't want it rolling around and back on Hopland Grade. So I took 20 west toward Ukiah, and I had already become aware of this guardrail destruction,
Okay.
and I couldn't explain how these guardrails got so fried. There was huge areas where the steel on the guardrail was literally sagging down to the ground. And I remember when I first saw it, God, man, it looks like somebody drove like a D8 across that. But it wasn't crushed, and there's no scuff marks on the pavement. I go, nah, that wasn't driven over. It sagged for some reason. But here's the roadway, okay? So picture this as roadway. And you have a section of guardrail here. So you have no fuel here to burn. Then underneath the guardrails, you have light fuels like grasses and whatnot. And the destruction on these posts was unbelievable, unbelievable. And so I went down to Petaluma, did my thing down there with my son, and then on the return trip, I came over 175, and I'm seeing the same thing on 175 with the guardrails. And some of them you could explain the intense heat based on the topography. You know, some of them were, you know, where you had a canyon that was, you know, fairly steep and plenty of fuel in it, and then the guardrail at the top. So some of them could be explained like that, but other areas I couldn't explain the destruction, because I would expect to find just light fuels like grasses and whatnot underneath them. So I got really suspicious of that, and then secondarily, a couple weeks after that, I was going to Ukiah, and I thought, you know, I'm going to stop and take some pictures of the guardrail destruction. Yeah. So it had just kind of piqued my interest. So I'm driving through, and flagman ahead, one lane ahead. Oh, okay. So we got stopped right around Blue Lakes, and by the time we got rolling, there was, you know, 100 cars in line. Right, kind of makes it hard to selectively pull over and look for evidence. Okay,
Right.
And I'm experiencing the biggest Caltrans crew that I have ever seen.
Right.
And I have lived in California all of my life except for the 2 years I was in Japan in the service.
Okay.
I have never seen anything like that. And this was fairly soon after the fires. Mm-hmm. So they sent this army of men and machinery, and they were replacing all these guardrail sections.
Interesting.
Okay, and then on 175, Hopland Grade, same
Yes.
thing's going on up there. Guess what else they're replacing?
All the pipes?
The culverts.
Wow. Oh, they melted? The culverts? We don't know.
We don't know.
Wow.
But they're replacing them for some reason. That one I couldn't figure out at all.
Wow. And could you explain to our listeners, what is a culvert?
Generally, under the roadway, a culvert is heavy steel, corrugated, galvanized steel. And it's just to allow for,
Like the ribs,
for runoff.
the ribs of the road, or where the guardrails are?
It's where water flows underneath the road.
Okay,
Underneath
got it.
the roadway.
So it doesn't wash out the road.
Yeah.
It's like a big pipe.
Wow,
underneath
so under the road, they're replacing those.
yeah.
Okay.
Which they had to cut the pavement and then pull the old one out and put the new ones in.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, and so to talk to on top of what he's saying, I noticed the same thing, and what I noticed, and he was talking about it, where these guardrails typically are on the side of the road, the fuel is sparse, okay, and you'll have light grass often, very light grass, sparse, not, you know, a little here, a little there.
Right.
And what I noticed is I saw a lot of posts burned that. How did that burn when some of the grass around it didn't burn? That was the part that
there wasn't enough fuel around it to support the destruction of the posts.
and so that's when I started. It just didn't make sense to me. How come? And so then I started thinking, God, I wonder if something to do with the metal. That was what, and I think we were both kind of thinking, I wonder if the metal has something to do with that wire. It just doesn't make sense for a normal fire. I wonder if something's different. Something's different. These are 6x6 posts, which, you know, if you have fuel up against them, they'll burn. But these didn't have, a lot of them didn't have fuel up against them. And, you know, and some of them, yeah, might have had enough fuel to get them going, but it just didn't seem to match. And all the guardrails are replacing that I've seen, at least up at Paradise, they're all metal posts now, no more.
All metal posts?
All metal, 100% metal, so no
Really?
wood.
So no more wood.
That was the first thing we noticed when we were going up Skyway, and that would have been on December 2nd, right?
Yeah.
We were going up Skyway, and I said, oh, look at all these guardrails have been replaced.
Really?
Like
Already.
immediately. So
Wow.
there's a push. There's been a push after these fires to immediately replace the guardrails, and like miles and miles of guardrails
Wow.
for whatever reason. It just seemed, and the way that they burned, you know, you think, why not? If maybe one or two posts might have burned, why not just replace one or two posts?
Right.
But they're replacing all the guardrails, so it just seemed
Highly unusual.
Seems strange to me,
Yeah.
and it seems strange for a lot of the guardrails that I've seen driving, that they would have needed to be replaced, and that the 6x6 wood post would have burned. And so that's when it started kind of matching up with some of the stuff we were seeing up there. Metal cars, total incineration to
Yeah.
metal cars, plastic garbage cans.
Talk about the
fine.
wheels, man.
Right.
Yeah, so the wheels of the vehicles. So this is and this is all kind of speculation, but one of the things with the wheels, again, when we both fought a ton of car fires over our career. The thing is, we usually put them out before they're totally down to nothing. So that can skew our view. But we've come across fully involved cars that have burned when we weren't there, that happened in the night and no one called them in or whatever. So we've seen both, but.
Okay.
Like he said, every car, total destruction, nothing left except the steel, the steel belt were all there, but nothing left at all that was...
The wires
The
in a
wires.
steel belted radial,
A radial tire?
Yeah.
but the tires were completely destroyed.
Whoa.
And the
it's-
rims.
It's like boats, trailers, you know, these vessels that wouldn't readily burn, that were on pavement, that down to nothing. I mean, so
Wow.
completely. So it's just, where did the heat come from? How did that happen? And so.
We couldn't explain it. In most cases, we could not explain it by the surroundings of the vehicle. In other words, some of them were parked in parking lots or in driveways. There would have been no fuel source, but obviously something caught him on fire. And as I said before, all the combustible materials in there, which when you think about your car, you've got plastic panels,
Yeah.
plastic
yeah.
dashboard,
Yeah.
your seats are plastic generally,
Steering wheels, all
steering
of that.
wheels, carpeting,
Wow.
but just absolutely no evidence of any combustible material in there.
Complete devastation.
Of these vehicles.
Complete devastation.
And your job is to, as firefighters, is also to kind of recreate the scenario of how could have this happened? And you're saying this doesn't make sense. It's in a freaking open parking lot where it's just pavement. What triggered this fire to this level?
back to the wheels.
Okay.
I did not observe any cases up there with total destruction of the cars where it melted steel rims. Okay, steel rims. I didn't see any evidence of that. They look to be generally intact,
Okay.
but the alloy wheels that are commonly
Aluminum? The aluminum?
on, yeah, it's an aluminum alloy.
Right.
So those were actually melted, and then there's rivulets of what was molten aluminum running down the street. And I think we've all seen images of that by
Right.
now. But again, that was a consistent finding.
What kind of heat does it take to melt the alloy wheels? Do you know offhand?
It's a range.
Okay.
Okay, it's a range.
1,200, something like that.
I think
Well, alloy's probably a little more.
yeah,
a little more.
like
yeah.
like it's a range,
Yeah.
maybe like 1,300 to 1,500, I think.
Yeah, that sounds probably.
Gotcha.
But here's the other
Yeah.
thing. Here's the other thing, and this is like a really an important point to
Okay.
make. When you think about a guardrail, you're talking something that's maybe 30 inches high
Okay.
off the ground.
Yep.
Okay. So heat likes to go up
Yes.
normally.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So we already discussed the lack of fuels underneath the guardrail, okay? And the same with the cars, because our experience tells us that on a fully involved car fire, that normally there's not enough combustible materials around the tires to cause that kind of destruction. So, typically you'll have, your outer fender of
Right.
the car, and then there's a wheel well on the inside, and typically those are plastic. But it's highly unusual for something that is that low to the ground to receive enough heat from other things that are burning to cause that kind of destruction.
Right, because you're saying it has no fuel. There's no,
There's not
no
enough
grass,
fuel
there's
around it.
no
Exactly.
leaves to like spark that.
And
so,
I am saying that the inner well is combustible, and
Right.
Matt and I have both seen flames blowing out of there. But typically, in a fully involved structure or car fire, the tires do not fail.
Mm-hmm.
And once in a while, it want to blow. It'll get enough heat,
Right, right.
and it also
right.
you'll hear it blow. But I have
This was
never.
on every vehicle.
Every vehicle,
Every
every
vehicle.
vehicle, total destruction, every vehicle, and that's where the anomalies. And the
So wild.
same with the structures, and that's
Uh-huh.
and one thing we noticed with the structures was we went up one place, say up Pence Road, and we saw a couple. The house, all the walls fell inward, total destruction to the house, all fell inward. The stucco walls that had fallen inward, they're fine.
Okay.
Total destruction to the house. Total
Okay.
destruction to the house. A garage, same thing. Everything, you could walk right around the whole foundation, nothing, no debris except the gusset plates that had popped out there. Everything had fallen inward, which told us that these structures are pretty, they look like they're burning from the inside out. The most heat is on the inside of the structures.
Really?
Which in a forest fire,
Outside.
you wouldn't, if they're the exposure to the forest, it's going to start on the outside or up in the attic, and
The,
it's not
narr-
gonna-
the narrative is that this was a huge, rapidly advancing forest fire that blew embers everywhere and caught these houses on fire.
Okay.
One house here is destroyed. Right over there, the house is fine. And Matt and I did not see the evidence present for that theory to hold. In other words, what we saw were the trees around these homes that were completely destroyed, where the trees were burnt, we both observed that the fire on those trees and the burning process on those trees was probably secondary to the house itself burning.
Interesting.
So it's the other way around. Instead of the
Interesting.
forest, burning in and burning these houses and consuming it, our evidence showed us time and time again that
forest was the exposure.
Wow.
so the exposure is something that catches on fire because
As
of
a
another
result.
fire. Yeah.
So it's logical. Go ahead.
And back to the metal having some significance to guardrails, posts catching fire, cars burning completely. We saw also like wood fences where they burned where the wire would go through, and they were fine everywhere else except they were burned where the wire attached.
Wow.
Or where metal
or
fasteners.
I saw another one. Oh, this
Wow.
one doesn't have wire. Why did it burn? Oh, it's just there's a metal spike
Wow.
there, and so it's just like, it's really
That
interesting.
is interesting. We have about 10 minutes left of the hour, which is just flying by. Could you guys recreate maybe the weather pattern that day? What did you hear of the fire? Did you get any information about winds or what the temperature of the
I know
surrounding?
that PG&E had been putting out alerts that they might shut off power in case of high winds.
Okay.
I do know that was going on, but
Yeah.
obviously I don't live up there.
Yeah, right.
So we did have some witness accounts talking about heavy chemtrailing.
Okay.
I'm just going to come right out and say
Yeah, we're gonna-
chemtrailing.
We're gonna cover that next hour, which I'm so thankful
okay.
for.
Yeah, and I probably maybe the same witness. I mean, there was a witness that we interviewed up in Magalia, and they had mentioned that they walked out and everything seemed fine. Everything seemed calm that morning. First
Right.
thing, everything seemed calm and
Right.
fine.
Right.
So,
Smart winds.
Smart winds and smart fires.
I
Yeah.
love that term. That's a brilliant term.
And that's
Smart.
going to be a great segue to our next hour of power here. So just as a recap for our listeners, we're basically saying what you saw was a lot of fire at the base. The canopy of the trees were not really touched. In a typical forest fire, you would see,
We would expect it, with the destruction in the middle of the tree, we'd expect it to crown out.
In order to
Crown out.
do the total devastation that it did to all these houses and community subdivisions, I would expect the crowns to be gone, the canopy to be gone.
right. And you're saying we saw hollowed out trees where the limbs wouldn't necessarily be burned, but the trunk and also the roots would be completely,
Yes.
That was
incinerated.
consistent over and over again. So
Over and
the
over.
concentration of heat appears to be close to the ground,
Yeah.
down.
down on
Yep.
the ground.
Yep.
And then you're seeing these cars, same concept, where there's nothing around to spark the fire of a car. All the cars that you've seen, for the most part, are incinerated, except for just the cage of the car itself. And we're also going to say glass was kind of warping a little bit, so suggestive of a very high
no,
temperature.
like very close to melting,
Melting.
I would say.
And what does glass melt at? Do you know?
It's
3,000?
27, somewhere
Yeah,
in there.
26, 27,
Yeah.
100
Yeah.
degrees.
26,
Yeah.
27 degrees. So we're not dealing with a typical forest fire. In all the years you had mentioned that this is a huge anomalies. You've never seen fires behave like this, but now you're starting to see kind of these patterns with the
Tubbs
Santa
fire.
Rosa Tubbs fire, the lake fire up here.
Pictures I've seen from the car fire, same thing. So overturned
yeah,
vehicles.
when we were up there on the 7th, we tried to get into an area and they denied us. They wouldn't let us in. And the California Highway Patrol officer was really nice, and he basically said, look, he goes, it's going to be straight with you guys. When we come out here, we do our shift, and he says we get a briefing. And they are doing work back in there that makes it too hazardous to go back in. And then he points down the hill, down into this draw where
Yeah.
the roadway was. He said they just did a culvert replacement down there.
So that piqued your interest.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they're doing this pattern of
Yeah.
replacing these culverts, and the guardrails are being replaced with all metal.
You could literally see where the fresh, where they had cut the blacktop, pulled the old culvert, put another one in, and then they had fresh blacktop over where the repair was made.
Wow, wow. So our time is just about up. If you're just tuning in for the first hour, I'm with two guests, John Lord and Matt, veteran firefighters, retired, and they're giving us some first-hand expert testimonies of the Paradise Fire. John, how can our listeners, if they want to learn more about some of your other work?
Probably the
find-
same way we did it before,
Okay,
Shelley,
yeah.
which would be to go through the site.
Yeah, go through and just remind our listeners where that is. Is it on YouTube?
No, through your.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
To get a hold of you, you're going to go ahead and call the station guys, ferlive.com. But he has also some interviews out there on YouTube, and the best way to do that is to just retired firefighter.
Retired fire captain.
Retired
Exclusive interview with retired fire
fire
captain.
captain.
Yeah.
And so we're really blessed. And how about you, Matt?
So I actually, this is my second.
This is-
my second
Yeah.
interview, and I've focused on research. So I don't even have a
Yeah,
web
so
page
if
up yet.
if
So
they need to get a hold of you, just contact the radio station.
correct, and through
And
you,
we'll get,
through you.
Yep,
yeah,
we'll get
yeah.
that. All right, guys. So you heard it here live, not live, but our recording a special interview. Next, what can we talk about next hour? What do you want to get into?
I want to finish up on the steel.
Yeah,
Okay.
we haven't.
The mobile home parks.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
finish up on that, and then we'll talk about resource deployment.
Yes.
So
So we're going to talk about that next hour. Resource deployment, we're going to talk about the steel. And then what else can we get into? Do you think we can talk a little bit about some theories of starting?
Ultimately, we're going to wrap it.
We're gonna we'll get to the
Okay.
get to our theories.
Awesome.
But yeah, the staging of resources, maybe some witness testimony, and
Excellent. Awesome, guys. All right, so tune back in. You're listening to ferlive.com, Down the Rabbit Hole with Shelley Lewis. Come back for the second hour, guys. We have a lot of more information to cover on these Paradise Fires. See you soon. Hang on tight. Hey everybody, welcome back to the second hour of Down the Rabbit Hole with Shelley Lewis. You're listening to ferlive.com. And if you are just tuning in, we are interviewing two firefighters, veteran firefighters, Captains John, Lord, and Matt. And we've been examining the findings of their many hours of investigation with the Paradise Fires. And if you missed last hour, we're going to archive all this so you can definitely get all the information. But we want to continue on with what's happening with the steel up there. And just to give you a quick recap, what we discovered was massive destruction up there with guardrails where the wood would be completely burned, and there's nothing to really spark the burning. Like the grass around the guardrails, there's not a lot of fuel up there. And so we're going to continue talking about the guardrails, and then we'll get into some other topics of some ideas of why this happened and some other connecting factors. So without further ado, I want thank you, Captains John and Matt, for being here. And John, I would like you to talk more about what's happening with the steel up there.
Okay. Before it leaves me, though, I wanted to kind of finish up what Matt talked about it in passing already, and that's that we looked at two separate open box trailers, like a dumpster type trailer, probably self-dumping, huh? We looked at two of those separate sites, completely different sites, and both of those trailers were identical in the way that they looked. We could not explain the amount of combustion around the outside of the trailer based on evidence that we were able to see and where they were parked. But these particular dump trailers, 2-axle trailer plus a spare mounted on the side, the rubber is completely gone. Like with the cars, rubber's completely gone. And the only evidence you can find that there was a tire on there is the steel belt that were in the radials.
Held
Yeah.
the rubber.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, dead on, and we could not explain the destruction of the tires based on the circumstances where they were located and so on and so
Right.
forth. Okay, so as we're going through this, we're becoming real suspicious about this whole thing with the steel. And so we went into a rather large mobile home park. We didn't even survey the whole park, but all of these mobile homes in this park, as far as we could see, were completely decimated. They're just destroyed. Literally destroyed, gone.
And their footprint. Basically, everything was
Basically, yeah.
down to
Okay,
the-
so what was left?
okay.
All right, so with newer mobile homes, they call them double wides.
Yes.
Okay, so they build them in two separate halves, and then they haul them down the road, and then when they get them on site, they level them out and attach the two halves together and do a little finish work and whatnot, and it's ready to rock and roll, right? For them to move them down the roadway, the build-up for the subfloor of the mobile home is actually a steel frame. Okay, so this frame in some cases, is only, foot or so off the ground, and we're looking at these frames for it's really about the only thing that's left,
Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah.
And we're looking at these frames, and I'm going, Matt, what caused this steel to distort like this? It's all buckled and twisted, and
Keeping in mind the heat goes up. These are at the
Yeah.
bottom.
So this
Yes.
is the bottom, and it'd be really unlikely that somebody could argue, well, they probably had a bunch of stuff stacked under there. I don't think I'm buying that.
Okay.
It's each one of these things that we're talking about on its own could be explained as, okay, well, that's an anomaly, but everything else seems normal, but that's weird how that happened. But when you start adding them up, adding each one of these up,
That's why we're trying to lay out the evidence like this.
and subdivision after subdivision after subdivision, the same exact thing. That's where
So
it paints a picture.
we're in the same mobile home park now, okay? And I want to talk about a couple of steel structures that we surveyed. Okay, the one steel structure was steel frame, steel roofing, carport. Okay,
Yes.
so not terribly long, I don't know what, maybe 10 or 12 feet long, probably 12 feet. And and it was close to the mobile home that was no longer there, that was burned.
Right.
And you could see on the edge of the roofing, where the edge of the roofing had taken some heat, there was evidence of that and some minor distortion, but just on the edge. And other than that, this whole carport looked brand new.
Wow.
It looked brand new.
Wow.
And that close to a fire, you would expect it to be
And at this
melting.
same mobile home park, the plastic lattice, which looked exactly like that, was fine. Was unburned.
PVC plastic lattice panels. So we're seeing different forms of destruction, and then things like lattice panels that should have been literally melted down. And there's like very little evidence that they were even close to fire.
Wow.
So it appeared that anything that the plastics that were attached to metals, like all the plastics attached to cars, total devastation. But where the plastics were by themselves, garbage cans, lattice, they seemed to fare just fine. Toy structures, plastic toy structures we'd seen, just fine.
Wow, like mailboxes and things too, right? That were plastic. I think we saw some of that. When
Okay.
we were driving through, we saw these mailboxes that weren't touched, but everything else was, and garbage cans, like to corroborate that. And then these houses, like they had just demolished on their own footprint,
Yeah.
which is,
And depending on a fire, if you saw a mailbox that survived, they're usually a post and they're sitting by themselves, and that can be explained away. But when you see this stuff where in the absolute exact vicinity where you had total destruction, that's when it makes no sense. Like this mobile home park, there were garbage cans in there that were perfectly fine with vehicles on the road, total devastation, and it just didn't make sense.
Then another interesting point is detached steel buildings. So here's the mobile home, sits right here, double wide mobile home, and in the back of it, a small garden shed, steel garden shed. Here's another mobile home over here, and they decided to copy the Joneses and get an exterior storage container like that. So they're basically exactly the same thing, only one's destroyed and one's not.
wow. I thought that was strange too. When we were driving up, we got into Concow, and we saw all of these like carports that were just metal that were completely fine, but then the cars below them were just demolished. Do you know anything about this? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. We saw cars that had X's on them.
Yes.
Do you know what? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So that's a way of marking whether or not they've been searched and whether or not they found bodies in there or not.
Okay.
That's what I'm assuming it is. I mean, that's
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
And
It's usually either an X like this or a 4-quadrant cross like this.
Okay.
And there's a certain quadrant you mark for primary search. Okay, so primary search is look inside and see if you got any victims, but it's not like a detailed search type thing. And then when it does get more of a detailed search, they mark another quadrant.
Oh, so they
And-
put things inside of those quadrants.
Yeah, with a
Numbers.
can of spray paint.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And another anomaly is the Bank of the West. When we were there, that mobile home that was set up, because I guess Bank of the West had burned a year earlier, so they had a temporary one of those mobile home
Yeah.
with a generator, one of those trailered generators
Right.
to run it for power. Generator completely burned up, and this is in a parking lot. But the actual Bank of the West mobile home building was completely intact.
Did not.
And
So
Wow.
this was actually, the generator would have been off the grid. Okay, so it was a standalone power source for the temporary bank
Gotcha.
and run off of diesel fuel.
Got it.
And
Got
it was completely demolished, and
Wow.
there's no explanation for it. It's sitting on pavement. There's nothing around it.
by itself. And I guess for me, I would be like, well, is it running on, you said diesel, but it would have to generate some kind of heat, enough heat to spark it, right? To
for
potentially.
that to catch fire, which was all metal, looked like it was all metal, I didn't see, and for the mobile home that it's powering,
That stayed
That's-
fine.
it just seemed odd that would
Yeah.
have totally burned and the mobile home not.
Yeah, and I'd like to reinforce what Matt said too, is that these different things that we were finding up there, there's indicators, and some of them were repeated again and again and again. And then there's other anomalies that we found, and that was one of the anomalies, is that generator had somehow gotten fried, and we sure couldn't explain it.
Right. Right.
And are you done talking? Well, do we want to talk about smart meters yet, or we still want to talk about? Yeah, we'll still talk about smart meters.
Yeah, we could talk about, okay, so we want to wrap this back near the end where we conclude
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
We want to
yeah.
wrap it back to the grounding.
Yes, exactly. We'll do that. We'll do that in some of our conclusions at the end. But so during the Santa Rosa fires, we questioned if smart meters had a role in any of this, and we heard rumors or whatever, and never. It was inconclusive for me, anyways. I'm not sure. I've heard stories. I've seen stuff about smart meters starting fires, and so I figured that might be a consideration. We went to Pearson Elementary School, and there was a standalone electrical vault service where the electrical service came in for the school in a metal vault, untouched by fire, 360 degrees all the way around. We walked up to it, we opened the door, and in it there was a smart meter that had melted and fallen to the ground.
Wow.
And everything else on the front panel,
V pattern.
yeah, and everything else on the panel, the main shutoff, there was a main shutoff to the school and the main power supply to the school, no other damage. Everything else was fine. So in order for that to burn, it didn't come from an external source. It had to have come through the wiring.
From
It
within.
had to come from within, whether it pulsed or surged,
surge or a short.
something through the wiring heated up and melted that. And it was, like I said, there was no external damage to where it was in a container.
Wow. Matt, could you tell our listeners, or John, explain what is the deal with a smart meter? What kind of triggered this idea that all these structures need to be updated with smart meters? Are you familiar with what that rollout was?
Yeah, so it gives, I don't know everything about it, but it gives a lot of information to PG&E, a lot of information. They can actually tell what appliances based on the hertz or megahertz are being used. It actually gives them the information, and it gives them the ability to remotely shut down your power, and it a lot more control over the system. And
They send out a pulse about every 15 or 20 seconds. They send this pulse out. And what they do is, in a neighborhood where everybody's got a smart meter, is they only supposedly send it to the next house downstream, so that ultimately it comes out tagging your house, but it's like they're talking
they all
to each other.
communicate with each other.
Okay, so it's like a a circuit, a network where
Yes.
these houses all talk.
But
to each other.
it's wireless.
It's wireless.
So, yeah, and the pulse, I've seen videos that people have done where they can actually take a measurement on, you know, the microwave
Yes.
energy that's coming out.
The electromagnetic energy that's coming out, and from what I've read, it can be extremely high, but it is so fast that they can make it sound like the way they do it. It's averaged out over a minute. It's not very much, but when they're doing it, and if you're in the vicinity, it's a really high. It can be a really high amount. So that's my understanding.
So this rollout of the smart meters happened a few years back, where in the past, PG&E or whatever your electric company would have to come and read your meter to see how many,
Right.
kilowatts of electricity you used, and now they're coming out with smart meters where these people don't have to come out to your house anymore. They can actually just tap in.
They have to come here.
Do they? Mine too. Mine too.
Mine too.
Yes, so let it be said, let it be known that we
Yeah,
don't like smart meter.
Yeah, praise the Lord that California still has an opt-out program. I did, that was one of the first things I did when I moved in here, is get rid of the analog meter, ditch that. And,
Oh, you mean the smart meter?
yeah, the smart
analog
meter, and
meter.
went back to the analog, yeah.
Right. And is it true that though you opt out and you pay more money, which is ironic, you pay more money for them, but is it true that if your neighbors don't opt out, do you know what the distance is that they can?
It's quite a distance. It's quite a distance because I had two on my property, and they were going to have them communicate with each other, and the one down by my shed down there, that's a good 70 yards, and they were, and I think they can go a long way, maybe a half mile. I'm not sure exactly. I think it depends probably on the obstructions.
Right. And so they kind of tailor it to say, hey, we can see how much energy you're using at the refrigerator level. I mean,
they can
when you cook,
they can sell the data. That data is for sale.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so we're going to find out a lot more.
Or they can
information.
send over the electricity police when you're drying rugs in your dryer and you have to run it for an extra cycle.
Wow.
Like yesterday.
Right? Oh, mercy. And so the smart meters really take away a lot of our liberty, and on my show I talk about getting your freedom back.
Oh, and there's health hazards,
Okay.
heavy duty health hazards with
Yeah.
smart meters.
The thing is, they haven't, done all the studies. Kind of like 5G. They're putting stuff out before doing the necessary
They're
studies.
rolling it out before
Yeah.
they even know what's happening with us.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to diverge there, but I just wanted to lay the foundation of what is a smart meter, how does it operate, and we know now that it's run by PG&E, and every house is kind of tagged. It's kind of like having your own personal.
And PG&E has come and put them without asking, without telling, just doing it. And now, when you say you don't want it, you have to pay them extra.
Exactly.
So they never actually came up and said, "Hey, we want to put this in. Do you mind if we put this in? And if we put it in, and you decide you don't want it, we're going to charge you." They never do that. They're just putting them in without asking if you care, and then they're charging you more when you want to remove it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, for me, the cost differential was worth it, just for the
Absolutely.
peace of mind. But I think for me, it was something like $13 or $16 a month more.
Right. Right.
And that's supposedly to cover the
People
cost
to come
of,
out and read
yeah,
your meter, which we used to.
which is fine.
Yeah,
I
totally
mean,
fine.
I can deal with that.
Totally fine. Okay, so let's go back to the smart meters. You had mentioned you'd seen the smart meter at the school, and it was completely.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of theories that smart meters might be part of what's causing all this devastation, what's going on with the smart meters, and so we were kind of suspicious. We wanted to see, and then when we saw that evidence with our own eyes, that it clearly was caused from the wiring. Somehow a surge of electricity or a pulse of electricity, and then it starts making me wonder about if it's heating up enough to do that, and all these anomalies, why are these houses burning from the inside out? Is there something that's happening to the wiring of the house that maybe is catching other things on fire? That's just me asking
Okay,
questions,
sure.
not, wondering.
Yeah.
So-
Not something that we feel comfortable proving.
Right.
We
But you
are
just saw
here. We are
give
here to
information.
talk about the anomalies that we
Yep,
did
that's
see
right.
and that we did document.
That's right.
So that bridges over into theory.
Right.
We're going to touch a little bit more on that in a minute.
Could you tell us a little bit about, were you able to do any forensics on any of the dust, any of the ash? Did you see anything that seemed unusual?
Well, if Matt and I were prepared, if we saw a little pile of white dust that's been reported up there, we would have taken a little sample of that to have it analyzed. But generally, everything up there, we tried not to disturb anything. We didn't touch anything.
Wow.
We just used this.
Yep, yep.
And like he said, in so many places where the anomalies were the most is where things were burned completely down to soil, down to
Right.
mineral soil.
Right.
So
Right.
it was nothing to get in a lot of.
When Jamie,
Right.
when Jamie and I went up there, we went the back way and we saw this massive PG&E staging area. I mean, literally it felt like thousands and thousands of trucks.
That's on Skyway.
On Skyway.
In between Chico and Paradise.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So
Closer to
we should
Chico.
probably get into that, into the resource development, the anomaly of the resources.
That'd be great.
So we have a witness that we spoke to up there that had driven down Skyway for at least 2 weeks prior to the fire, and he looked off to the south of Skyway, looked off and where it used to be a golf course, he noticed a huge amount of PG&E trucks and tents and other equipment there, like a staging area, and he was wondering what is going on, asking about other family members, and this was for at least 2 weeks prior to
2
the fire.
weeks prior.
Okay, 2 weeks prior, PG&E setting up some massive staging area
Yes.
near the golf course.
Yes.
In Paradise.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's the same one that when we went up Skyway, we saw it, and it was massive. It was massive, and so we saw exactly what he was talking about. But that was apparently,
What do you guess on the amount of acreage that they were using there?
well, it was a golf course. So I don't know. I mean,
40, 50 acres? Is what
maybe.
That's kind of what I
it's 40,
guessed.
50 football fields, about an acre. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It was a big area.
Huge staging area.
Okay.
It was big. It was.
I didn't think that we had that many PG&E trucks in the whole state of California. Did you, Matt?
New
Yeah.
headquarters, probably.
Oh my God! The first day we were up there, we were absolutely blown away. We saw hundreds
Hundreds of PG&E
PG&E
And what were
trucks.
they doing?
Well, they were all coming down. We didn't actually get in the first day, so
Yeah.
we got turned around. But they were all leaving work. It was 5:30 or something like
Right.
that.
They're coming
They were all
down the hill.
coming down
Right.
Skyway,
And we're-
it was just
We're at the stop
Convoy.
sign, to pull out onto the highway to go down the hill in
Right.
the direction that they're going. And it took us somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes to get out of there. It was just
all
like,
the trucks, like
yeah,
caravan,
yeah.
caravan.
and other service trucks.
Were they identified?
Some of them you could identify, some of them I couldn't. There was outfits in there from out of state, and also logos that I didn't recognize as being a California resource.
Okay.
So other things that maybe it was just being very efficient. Don't know. I mean, we talked to a rep from OES on our first trip up there, and they said that they were set up that first day. So it seemed
Sorry
awfully.
about that. We're gonna just.
Am I still on?
You are now.
So OES had everything set up. They said the first day, which I don't know what they normally do, how long it takes, and where they were getting the resources from. Maybe right out of Sacramento. It seemed awfully quick to me. Don't know, John. Do you have any?
No, it seemed unusually quick.
Yeah, it seemed awfully quick to me. And then you compile that with that all the staging of PG&E vehicles and other vehicles 2 weeks prior. That seemed strange.
That does seem strange.
I would say they had some really smart managers managing the
Smart
smart
managers,
fire
smart
because they were
ways.
able to anticipate that fire was going to happen 2 weeks ahead of time.
That is very, and then the fact that PG&E says we're going to be shutting down people's.
Yeah.
For like every day for how many days, a week or 5 days or something.
Yeah.
They said that. They kept saying it over and over and over.
Right.
So,
And, it was a little bit reminiscent of the World Trade Center, explaining the World Trade Center, how they were just so right on top of that, how they knew exactly who the perpetrator was and how he did it
well,
from a
they
cave in
found a
Afghanistan.
passport on the ground. They
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
find
yeah.
one
Right.
in the rubble.
That survived
in the rubble.
those massive
Yeah.
fires that happened.
It was a
Yeah.
little bit reminiscent of that because, first of all, I never heard any reports of down wires. Okay, that's me personally, and I have not heard those reports. What I heard consistently was that PG&E reported it had some kind of a problem in its lines. Okay, and that would have been on the it's Concal, Concal side.
Yeah.
So near where the fire burned in the wildland, up toward Paradise. Okay, so problem. And then the investigation seemed to immediately focus on that. So the official fire investigation seemed to immediately focus on, it's PG&E, right?
Right.
And that is what reminded me of the World Trade Center.
Right.
Pay no attention over
Yeah.
here. We've got the answer right over here.
So
Wow.
another interesting note is legislation was just signed. I think it was in October, maybe September, allowing PG&E to pass on liability to its customers.
That's SB 901.
So I'm not sure.
I think it's SB
I
901.
think you're right. I
So-
remember that too,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we were going to eat the costs
Yeah.
of all of the damage that happened with PG&E, that they would just
Yeah.
roll it
So
over
that
to
just
the
Yeah, they're
within
just-
the last couple
Let
months.
the consumers pick up
Yeah.
the difference on it.
Right,
So
right.
it's-
All of it seems so fishy. And I was reading SNR September the 20th, and they had a picture of PG&E with this big transformer, a literal, those cartoon transformers, like with electricity coming out of his eyes. And I hope I'm saying that right. And is PG&E trying to burn up California with their lack of being able
Sounds like a David Dees artist picture.
Yeah,
if
it
you're
was
familiar.
crazy. And I saw this article after this huge fire happened, and I was like, wow, it's September 20th. Here it is sitting on my table, and it's a picture of PG&E. So it's kind of feeling like, it makes you go wonder what is going on. Yeah, so PG&E's up there. Did you guys see any military?
Yes, yeah, we did. First day we went up there, we saw a ton of MRAPs. What else, John?
Let's see, that particular field was next to the airport where we saw the MRAPs. And I forget what MRAP stands for, but it's basically a military explosion-resistant vehicle.
Yeah.
And there was probably about 20 of them in there. And then the other thing that we were able to see in there is some sort of big human resource allocation area, because there was this great big huge tent or temporary enclosure, and the guy at the gate was telling us, yeah, that's where they eat and recreate and whatever. It's like, wow.
And where was that? Was that in Chico? Or
This
that
was in Chico.
That was in Chico.
Yeah.
And
Near the airport.
Near the airport. And was it the Office of Emergency Services? Is that
Yes,
where you
yes.
took? Okay.
Yeah.
And they had huge flatbed trailers in there with what looked to me like great big generators, portable generators.
Interesting. And did they say anything when you went in to ask questions?
They said you can't go in.
Yeah, they had everything heavily
On
protected.
lockdown.
Yeah, guarded. So yeah.
And this is kind of near the airport in Chico, where the operations of emergency services were set up, and that's where you saw the tanks and the military as well, or did you actually sit inside Paradise?
No, they were at that site.
At that site. Interesting. And did you find anything up in Paradise? Did you see any tanks or any military presence up there?
I didn't. We had a witness that we witnessed the first day that said as she was trying to leave, and I think that was the Magalia area, she saw 3 military vehicles, and she wasn't sure what they were. Then she thought that she was surprised to see them up there, also leaving in the same group of vehicles that she was trying to get out of there.
Yeah, I didn't see any either.
Okay.
So-
I just remember one at the gate. I went up there. We went I think we followed you two when you guys went in through Skyway to get into the main road, and we got turned away. But the night before, I had driven up the back way, and there was a big tank there with a guy, military, apparently National Guard, but
Yeah, we know they were there.
yeah, they were there. Okay, so could you guys talk a little bit more? So we've established kind of this smart meter anomaly. Do you care to kind of talk about how is that tied to fires? Can smart meters in and of themselves get triggered to start a fire? Do we know?
Well,
Yeah, there's.
that to me it was obvious based just on that proof alone, where in a protected cabinet that's unburned. It's not like the doors were open and it got burned externally. Otherwise, we would see evidence. But it was burned itself. So it either was a surge or a pulse that overwhelmed the meter. So was it if it had been analog, would it have started? I've never heard of an analog meter fire. I've heard of a lot of smart meter fires, but never heard of an analog.
Not associated with Paradise.
Right.
Right.
Just
exactly.
standalone.
Yeah. So
Smart meter
and so
fires.
having heard that and being kind of trying to pay attention, and then when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, there's something here that absolutely can start fire. Now, is that something PG&E can do by pulsing too much power through the line, or a certain frequency? I don't know, but somehow it's getting through the line and it's happening. So
Something happened, and then, we have the obvious question that jumps out is, how come PG&E's telling everybody they're going to shut off the power, and then this fire starts, and in supposedly very high windy conditions, how come the power wasn't shut off?
yeah.
Interesting.
That's, I mean, to
Interesting.
me, that's a no-brainer
Right.
to ask that question.
There are a lot of things too. More witness statements. Nobody for saying this is red flag.
They didn't get
red
warned.
flag all week long. Going to have high fire dangers. They never got a phone call. Never, and they what is that?
Nextel.
Nextel or Nexel.
Nextel.
Nexel. They members of that. They never got a phone call that there was a fire.
So, as firemen, could you explain to our listeners what is Nextel? What is a service that?
It is a service where you can call up or do it online. You get into it, you sign up for it, and you sign up by zip code. So for me, I'm actually in two of them.
Okay.
So for Lake County by zip code, and then also I monitor where my kids live in Petaluma.
Got it.
So I'm two, and you could go up to 5 zip codes.
Got it. So you can sign up and say, hey, if there's like some kind of evacuation emergency alert system, call my phone, or is it call my cell phone?
It just automatically sends
Calls the
you
number.
like usually a text message.
Okay,
Usually.
so you've got a cell phone
Yeah.
to get that information. And what you're saying is that we've heard from witnesses that they never got this.
Correct.
Consistently
And
from
do you
a large
usually-
number of witnesses.
Okay, got it. And do you usually, who sends those messages out? Is it the fire department? Is
It's
it
not the
police?
fire department. It's
Sheriff? I think it might be sheriff. That they
It
get
probably
routed
is.
through.
It probably is the sheriff's department. It would be my guess, and they, push a button, and everybody that is subscribed or on the list automatically gets a phone call. But I'm
Shoots them out.
I'm speculating, but that would make sense to me because
Gotcha.
they're the ones that would know.
Gotcha.
That someone in the county dispatch or
I'm going to stop real quick. I'm going to change out my battery. We're going to keep talking I'm here, if you're just tuning in, I'm here with Matt and John, retired firemen, and we're talking about the Paradise Fire. Some of the things we've been discussing have been about the anomalies
Where we're up to.
of where the fires are burning and the trees are not, right? And where the grass fires are burning, or where
Want me to
there
cover
should be
that?
grass burning, there's not, but yet these
Sure.
guardrails are
Okay.
burning. All right, so we're gonna come back here. I'm gonna keep recording here. All right, so,
add this in there. I want to add this first.
okay.
Okay.
All right, welcome back, guys. I had to do a quick battery change out. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Down the Rabbit Hole with Shelley Lewis. We're in our second hour, and you're listening to FVRlive.com. We're going to continue on for the next probably 10 minutes or so. We're going to do a little wrap up of this hour, and then come back to the next hour. We're going to do some theories, some conclusions of what we have discovered. As you know, this is a huge story. The Paradise Fire, supposedly the narrative is that 52,000 people got out without any Nextel warning at all, or very limited warning, I should say, and on a 2-lane road that were flames on both sides, and we're just trying to kind of reel that in and do a little bit of investigative work. So welcome back, John and Matt.
Thanks
for the quick battery change on. Okay, so go ahead, Matt.
So I would like to continue on another witness statement. We had a couple witnesses that we interviewed on our last trip up, and they both stated that they had an inability, ever since the fire, inability to concentrate or focus. And you could say that would make sense because they've been through a post-traumatic stress situation, but I didn't really get that from. They were cool, calm, and collect, and they said so it didn't really strike me as that was what was causing it. It seemed like there was something more.
I'm in agreement with that too.
So they said they had an absolute inability to really focus or concentrate. So that maybe there was something going on that was causing that. So
And this was prior to the fire?
No. This was just our last trip up there. They said
Okay.
ever since the fire,
Gotcha.
they've noticed that they can't think clearly, and it seemed to me, since they were both seemed very cool, calm, and collected, that it seemed like you couldn't explain it away just from post-traumatic stress. It seemed like it was more than that. Like it was truly, there was something above and beyond that, because they seemed very, both their places were saved. They
Wow.
weren't, and they both seemed like in every other way they were dealing with everything just fine. It's just they could not focus or concentrate. So it seemed like more than just the post-traumatic stress from the fire. So whether there's something to that or not, it's just another piece of information.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, did you want to talk about grounding? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. So we're going to go into another area.
Okay, so we did a lot of discussion about the various steel structures and steel buildings that we looked at and surveyed and photographed. The mobile homes, when they bring those in, all of the mobile homes were set on masonry pier blocks.
Okay.
So the only way for that building to be grounded would be through, a pretty good sized piece of copper wire from the panel down into a grounding rod.
Okay.
And then we also talked about the difference. This shed got all burned up, this one didn't. And what really got my attention was the freestanding carport that I talked about.
Yes.
I couldn't explain why that thing was in such good shape after what it just went through. And I went, the posts for it are through the concrete slab down into the ground.
So they're grounded.
They're grounded.
Gotcha.
So as I became aware of that, Matt and I talked about it briefly, and then we both just started watching for it. And understanding that, are you familiar with the term Faraday cage?
I'm familiar with it.
Okay. So a car is a really good Faraday cage, except
The tires.
it's not
Grounded.
grounded. So
Yes.
if you ground your car, like when I used to park my truck in Roanoke Park, I used to keep it on a grounding wire where I could just unlatch it for the truck if I was using the truck.
Okay.
But
And what would be the point of grounding your car?
All the energy that goes in, if it got hit,
Like
It would have
lightning or
some
something?
place to go.
It'll release that energy.
Okay.
And so you think about a car, because it wants the energy wants to go to ground.
Right.
Everything wants to go to ground.
Right.
And where's it going to go with the car? It's going to go through the tires to
Which
get to
are
ground.
rubber.
Which are rubber.
So it's insulated.
So, and what's that going to do to the tires?
Yeah.
It's going to heat them up
Right.
as it's trying to get to ground.
Right.
So that was started.
And that would explain the distortion of the steel frames in the mobile home park, the frames they're built on.
Interesting.
If there was some sort of energy flowing through the steel and the metal pieces, like the fence posts that Matt talked about with the spikes and the wires,
That was catching everything else in the cars. That was catching all the combustibles in
all
the
the
cars.
combustible contents on fire.
That's what it appeared to us, is all the metal. If all the metal had an energy going through it that was heating up anything that was attached to it, that everything we saw would kind of goes along with that.
Wow.
It's a form, think of it this way, resistance heating.
Yes.
Resistance heating is where you have an element, like in your toaster, you have the elements in there, and when you put your toast down, they get red hot, and they start toasting it. So it appears that whatever happened caused things that were ungrounded to hold the heat energy in, and which eventually would just get hotter and hotter and hotter. That's what we're
Wow.
suspicious of. That's what we're
Wow.
thinking about. And that evidence was in all the vehicles we talked about that were torched. The 2 box trailers with no fuel around them, the metal outbuildings, the carport, the mobile homes. The school had a lot of metal plumbing and all kinds of stuff in it, and it's a plausible explanation to be led to.
Wow. Okay, so let me just try to piece this back together. You're saying that based on some observations that these cars that were not good grounding to begin with because they had rubber tires, these mobile home parks that didn't have good grounding because of just the copper wire that just goes down into the ground when they piece
When they put the panel in.
them together.
Yeah.
As opposed to these carports that are poles going through the concrete into the ground are standing while the cars are not, and these mobile home parks are not. What about these houses? These houses that kind of collapse inside of themselves.
So I'm in agreement that I think that the grounding there might be a grounding component,
Yes.
but and this kind of gets us to some more conclusion. So I think
Sure.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
evidence to what he's saying, and
Yeah.
I love what he's saying about the resistant heating, and I think
Yes.
that's the resistant heating is I agree. Everything to me kind of agrees with that.
Yeah.
You see the fence posts that are burned where the wire went through.
Right.
Or all the, and that explained the cars, the metal. So it's the metal, anything that was touching the metal, it just seemed like
Wow.
burned really,
Right.
and these houses burned from the inside out is what it looked like. The
Right.
most destruction and devastation
Right.
was on the inside. And so I'll get to it right now. It reminds me of, the metal car down to nothing left, just a shell, and the plastic garbage can just fine. Reminds me if you had a big microwave and you could put a plastic toy or in there, and you could put some tin foil, which one's going to do better?
Right, and they tell us always to
Or-
avoid metal
Or a piece
in
of
the
wood,
microwaves.
a piece of wood and a piece of metal. Well, wood burns, metal doesn't, right? Well, in a microwave, what's gonna burn?
Wow. If you're just tuning in, we just, we are going down the rabbit hole. We are getting deep layers. You're listening to FERlive.com, The Ferret. This is Shelley Lewis coming at you from down the rabbit hole with my 2 guests, John Lord and Matt. And we're examining a lot of the evidence that they discovered while up at the Paradise Fires. Our hour is just about up, and we're going to come back next hour and talk more about conclusions, theories, And I really want to get into more about this microwave technology. And if you, personally, my own opinion is this was an event that was, and I'm going on the record saying it, was planned, because it just seems like everything is pointing to that. And we've thrown out terms such as smart meters and grounding and some kind of microwave event. But I want to talk too about directed energy weapons, and if that might be some kind of moving part in this huge chaotic mess. We try to say, oh, it's just one thing, it's this thing, but really I think it's this concert of things that have happened, and nothing at this point is off the table. So definitely come back next hour, guys. You're listening to FERlive.com, The Ferret. I'm Shelley Lewis with Down the Rabbit Hole. See you next hour. Hey everybody, welcome back to the third hour. You're listening to Shelley Lewis with Down the Rabbit Hole, FERlive.com. And if you have not been tuning in for the first 2 hours, we are in the third hour of interviewing expert testimony from retired firefighters John Lord and Matt. And the first 2 hours have been so fast and furious with just a plethora of information. And this last hour, we're going to try to draw some conclusions, give us some theories of what happened with this Paradise Fire and just the anomalies. And if you didn't get to hear the first 2 hours, we're going to have these archived so you'll be able to tune in at a later time. But welcome back, John and Matt.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks so much for all that you guys are sharing with our listeners here. And we're just really grateful for the time that you've given us. I wanted to get right into the do's. The do's and don'ts, right? For those of you who don't know what that means, DO is a directed energy weapon, and it's basically out there as this ammunition, this laser technology that doesn't require any ammunition, that can be shot from the skies. And Fox News did a big report, and for those of you who heard me a few weeks back, I played that clip for you. But we can't help but ask this question: is this a role in some of these fires where these firefighters have not seen these type of fires in all their careers? So I'm going to just put the question out there for John or Matt to take, please.
Well, I'll start by saying a year ago, after the Tubbs fire, John and I started scratching our heads and doing research, and that's what could have caused this. What happened, and we both started coming up with the same potential theories, and absence of any other explanation. Because we could not come up with any other explanation, we started looking into directed energy weapons, and it's like, oh my God, this could actually explain it if this was actually what was going on.
Number of fires, rate of spread, et cetera, et cetera.
And the way the fires burn. So we've been talking to you, and we've mentioned the word microwave. We've been talking to you of how these things that are metal and attached to metal burn completely, and how things that were plastic, standalone plastic, whether it be garbage cans or play structures, seemed to be fine. And it just seemed similar to what you'd see if you stuck those in a microwave oven. Wow. And then you start reading about directed energy weapons, and it's like, oh my God, is this, and I'd love somebody to explain another way, another theory, another method that would explain these anomalies that we've seen. And I hope this is not the case, but that makes the most sense for me at this point. It makes the most sense of what's going on.
When I think of directed energy weapons, I think of lasers, laser technology. And the evidence is out there for anybody that wants to look, anybody that thinks this is a bunch of hocus pocus, that these things don't exist. The evidence is all over the internet. These companies give these elaborate presentations for their stockholders and show off their wares. And this is a laser weapon that we mounted to the nose of this airplane. The evidence is out there. So there's virtually no argument that they exist.
Yeah, it exists. The military has it. It can be done from satellites, from drones, from airplanes, from helicopters, or it actually can be ground-based. So that it all exists, and it's pinpoint accurate. It's pinpoint accuracy. They can with laser technologies, and the difference between laser and microwave is just the frequency. It's all the same. It's all
Right.
frequencies, and it's just different frequency on the electromagnetic spectrum. That's all it is. So
Okay, so yeah, I don't know that all that much about directed energy weapons, but I know that what I've seen generally appears to be kind of like a laser, but it appears that there's what, for lack of better words to use, a palette of technologies that are available, and it might just be different frequency ranges that they're using. But I was able to find pretty clear and compelling evidence during the Tubbs fire that with pinpoint accuracy, like Matt pointed out, that those houses were decimated by what looked to be laser technology. But there's differences between that fire and the Paradise fire. The Paradise fire, we were able to see wood stoves, refrigerators, washers and dryers. None of that was left after the Tubbs fire. So it just appeared to be and feel a little bit different.
a little not, and it was total devastation, but the shells were still there. The shell of the refrigerator was there. The shell of the stove. The shells were still there on this fire. Everything was destroyed, but the shells were there. In the Tubbs fire, there were a lot of foundations where there were no shells of anything. It was just total devastation. So, yeah, and then you get back to, he mentioned something earlier with the directed energy weapons. You get back to quote-unquote chemtrails. And chemtrails is a slang term. It's actually not a scientific term. But you've got stratospheric aerosol injection, which is a true term. You can look it up. That is going on. Geoengineering, solar radiation management. And the military has it's on record a lot of the stuff that they have sprayed over the years. And looking into directed energy weapons, when you look at how it interacts with different particulate, if it is directed energy weapons, and we were told by witnesses that there was heavy spraying for several days prior to the fire, then I believe it works synergistically with what they're spraying. And I know they're affected, the weaponry is affected by the particulate matter, how much is in the air and how wide a pattern depending on the different type of directed energy weapon. And this is all sourceable information on the internet.
Yes.
So
We talked about the destruction of the tree roots and the stumps and down low, close to the ground.
Yes.
That would probably be the heaviest concentration of metals that the tree had actually uptaken.
Wow.
So,
Metals such as aluminum.
aluminum oxide,
Aluminum oxide, which
So-
are highly flammable. Is that correct?
yes, I absolutely would probably kill somebody in a debate, not literally kill them.
Yeah.
But I would probably be able to just debate and back them all the way into a corner unless they're willing to come out and have an honest discussion about the role of geoengineering and chemtrails. If that is not part of the discussion, I don't care what fire it is in California or anywhere else, if that is not included in the discussion, then they're not telling the truth.
and that goes into, weather management, climate management. That is actual a real thing. I mean, they've been managing the weather for a long time, and that's one of their. They have NexRad, they have HARP, and then the spraying that they're doing, so they're able
And
to
atmospheric,
move the jet stream where they want. They've had different operations starting in the Vietnam War. Operation Popeye, where they flooded out the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We never hear any talk about using the weather as a control mechanism for any of these fires.
To extinguish the
By
fires.
design, they don't want people thinking that they have the control that they actually have, but they absolutely have control over the weather. They are controlling the weather. They can make it rain, make it not rain. They weaponize the weather.
They can make hurricanes, they can steer them.
Right. And so
Yeah.
for those of you who are not familiar with this, please Google, or what's another one besides Google? I heard that's not a good one to use anymore.
Internet search.
Yeah, do internet search, right? Of HAARP,
HAARP,
Yes.
highly active Aurora
High-
Research,
Yeah.
Aurora Research Program.
High altitude.
No,
Aurora.
active. I think it's highly active or high. I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
it's highly
the
active Aurora Research
Yep.
Program.
And you're totally right. This is all patent.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is-
Absolutely.
Yeah, they were supposed to use it for good. Like, we can bring rain to those who need it, right? Droughts and...
The first, you can look up geoengineeringwatch.org has a hole on the top of their page. They have it says patents. You can go look up those, and those are all documented government documented patents. First one I think starting in 1891 for modifying the weather.
Wow.
So they've been doing it for a long time.
Right, and there were reports out, I read through the mainstream media, that people in that area, in Paradise area, were complaining this white film that they would find
Yeah.
on their vehicles and things.
Yes.
And then there was also pictures that surfaced, and we have testimonies of people who saw blue lights before.
Yes, and we've seen photos of blue lights, and that would.
That was, the ones that Jamie had on the trees.
Yeah,
and whatnot.
I mean that would go along, with some sort of laser or microwave weapon. So
Right.
it's is speculation, but speculation on what else could it be?
Right.
What else could it be? And when you have evidence of blue lights, same thing. There was some photo evidence during the Tubbs fire. Same thing.
Interesting.
So-
Interesting. And so as we connect the dots, we're seeing that smart meters, grounding, lasers, no forest really burning at the canopy level. I guess is the
Yeah.
canopy.
Well,
Okay.
again, there was differences in it.
Differences,
It
anomalies.
depended where we were looking.
Right.
Yeah.
And if these fires were caused by directed energy weapons, and it did have these effects that we're talking about, burning, trying to get to ground, and burning this way, the exposures and whatever's around is going to automatically start normal fires, if that
Uh-huh.
makes sense.
That does
So
make
you
sense.
probably never have just a directed energy weapon fire without it causing a normal fire. So you're going to see signs of both, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That one would trigger kind of this
Exactly.
natural way that you would get fire.
Exactly.
So it's convoluted. It's
Yeah.
not going to be completely
So,
pointed.
I mean, when I looked at a lot of the photos and walking up there and seeing, a lot of the vegetation actually resisted burning. It looked like it wasn't the perfect conditions. It
Interesting.
resisted burning, where structures did not resist burning. They burned completely.
Interesting.
So,
And what did you find? Have you heard the narrative that, well, the trees were just full of water, and so they didn't burn like a normal tree would burn in a forest fire? Have you ever found that in a forest fire, fighting fires?
well, then we shouldn't have had a forest fire. And that's my whole point. They resisted burning. I agree. The trees resisted burning. It's almost as if the forest was at the cover. It's the trees resisted burning.
Right.
I did notice the trees resist burning, except at the base where they were burned, created craters in the ground.
Right.
There were some areas in that canyon where they normal fires. So I think different areas they burned because of the conditions and the winds and the fuel moisture. I think that, had pretty good fire going through, but a lot of other areas where, maybe a north slope where it's wetter, greener vegetation, it seemed to resist burning.
Could we go back to just the idea of how you talked about in the fire in Santa Rosa, you said that the winds blew from west to east, right?
The winds during the Tubbs fire were
Tubbs fire.
basically.
They were from the north, basically, from the north and maybe the northeast.
Right.
Northeast burning southwest.
Got it. And then what about the fire in Paradise? Did you remember?
So that burned from the north, and it burned south. I would say southwest. So from the northeast to the southwest.
And is that usual?
Well, the north and easterly winds, like the Santa Ana winds, easterly winds, those are the worst because they're coming from the land, not from the ocean.
Gotcha.
Coming from the east, so they're the driest, they're the
Yeah.
most dangerous.
Got
What do they
it.
call it? The Satan winds, Santa Ana.
Santa Ana. And so for this, I was just wondering if we could talk about that briefly, but it sounds like, because I've heard different reports that the winds that were blowing that day, well, some said there were no winds, then some said, yeah, there were winds, and then, you talked about the cars flipping upside down, that being an anomaly about some kind of fire NATO. I've heard that term being used.
And so I did not see any of that on this one. Like I
Okay.
said, I saw less destruction on this one. I didn't personally witness the car fire, but I saw a lot of photo evidence of vehicles moved and flipped over upside down on a car fire, as well as the Tubbs fire. I did not see that on this one.
I see.
So
Just strange cars, like you had said,
yeah.
completely.
The rate
burned
of
up.
spread, I've heard different things about the rate of spread on this fire, the Paradise Fire, and it seemed incredible. Like,
Very fast.
yeah, very
They
fast.
said 80 football fields a minute. Is that?
Something like that is
and
what I heard.
So, I mean, incredibly fast. Yeah.
What would cause a fire to move that fast? Have you ever seen a fire move that fast?
So, if it's a
That's a good
typical
question.
normal wind caused by nature, it's the wind is the big factor. The wind is always the biggest factor in how a fire's going to react.
Wind and terrain.
But yeah, it burned fastest upslope, uphill, south slope where it's drier, uphill. But if there's some sort of other technology being used, then I have no idea.
All bets are off at that
Yeah.
point. Interesting. Okay.
There appears to be, with the evidence of causing us to suspect these technologies being used to intentionally start these fires, which I would remind everybody that if people are intentionally starting these fires, they are guilty of genocide. Period, the end. But it appears with these technologies that there is some correlation to it causing its own local wind pattern. And that was evident with the Tubbs fire down through the Napa Valley. The people were reporting these crazy winds, and people were even reporting it quite a distance away from there. There was I saw some reports where people felt it in San Francisco.
And typically fires do create their own weather. They create their own wind and create their own weather. And
We're
so,
talking at the start, though. At the start.
Yeah. So, but I mean, just typically natural fires throughout our career, we know that they create their own weather to a certain extent. And now, if you're enhancing them, or if they're being weaponized through technology, then it would just only make sense that everything would be enhanced. The winds, everything else would just be a much greater, based on the heat and whatever else.
Interesting. Smart winds, right? These winds that would be so smart.
Smart winds, smart fires, smart meters.
Right? Speaking on that idea of smart winds, John, I want to go back to where you're talking about these mobile home parks and how they weren't grounded or potentially not grounded. But yet I've seen some of these photographs that have surfaced where these trees aren't even touched, but yet this whole mobile home park is completely.
That was our experience with the Tubbs fire.
Okay.
Is that number one, Coffee Park in Santa Rosa is not wildland. That's number one. It's flat and it's not wildland. Number two is the only thing that got destroyed was the homes, and the trees right next to them were fine. They were still green. Mm-hmm. So this one in Paradise is a little bit different because the trees seem to have had a greater role in the fire. Wouldn't you say, Matt?
Yeah, so the trees were, I mean, there was less, I mean, there was total devastation, but like I said, the shells of different things in the houses were still there, so it wasn't down to nothing like it was in Santa Rosa. But the canopy was still fully intact in most places, it appeared, at least around the structures and the subdivisions that we visited. The canopy was intact, and so something created this incredible amount of heat at all these houses and subdivisions. That wasn't enough, but it wouldn't get the crown going, wouldn't get the canopy going.
Right. I want to switch gears here
Yeah.
because this is really dear to my heart. I went up with Jamie, as a lot of my listeners know, and we were just really concerned about the victims and how could that many people get out, because we were hearing conflicting stories from some of the first people who got out, from some of the tow truck drivers who went in after the fire had happened. And you know, I want to understand more about where are they. If you guys can even give us any kind of theory.
Wouldn't we all like to know that?
Yeah.
We believe that the total population in Paradise and around Paradise is somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000. And that Paradise is a town limit, so it's marked. The town limits are marked, and it says 27,000. We believe, based on the witness testimony, that there has been a significant buildup over the last 15 or 20 years up there, increasing. So we're looking at numbers probably more like 50,000. And what happens in a disaster like that is that if people wait too long to get out, the roadways turn into parking lots. There's just too much traffic congestion.
And this fire sounded like it just happened so fast that people left as soon as they knew there was danger. It seemed like they left.
Well, we talked about the alert system. If they had been alerted to do a mandatory evacuation, maybe more people would have gotten out. But
so, do we remember how many residences were destroyed?
I think they said like 16,000 possibly,
So,
roughly.
because it just seemed odd to me when we went up there the first day that the low number of victims that seemed to be that
stuck out to me as well.
Odd, and I haven't really followed this like others. I haven't really paid attention. It's more focused on the fires and the evidence of the burning and how did it burn. And so I don't know, but that did stick out to me as, God, it seemed like there'd be more people needing help. And when we went to the shelter, there weren't that many people. There weren't very many people. I'm like, where is it? Are these all second homes for people, or are these all? So where is it? So I don't know. I can't answer any more than that.
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. But based on the testimony from the tow drivers and what I saw of the evidence immediately after the fire blew through there, I believe that many people lost their lives inside their cars, that they were literally just torched alive. And can I prove that? Well, all the evidence has already been removed. And, those cars along the roadway that we see the pictures of where it looks like they pushed them off the shoulder of the road, those have all been removed already. So the cars that Matt and I were looking at up there were, personal vehicles that were not on the highway.
So I'll tell you one thing that bothers me is I've talked to people that I know in the area, and 30 days after the event, I think it was up 30, maybe I'm wrong on the time, but a long time, weeks after the event, they still weren't able to go up there and check on their cats or whatever. And when we got through there, PG&E had been there, and they were fine to be in there. I mean, they turned the power off. They could escort people in, but people were not allowed in even to check on their pets for a long time. And so that bothered me. While you had crews of hundreds of PG&E crews in there, cutting trees, putting in power lines, while the residents, the property owners, weren't allowed to go in and check on their animals or their cats or whatever. So that stuck out as it seemed just like a lack of respect for the property owners.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too. we went up there and we saw, these horses and these dogs that did survive, and they were just kind of roaming up there and really hungry. I felt like they were hungry. We were like throwing them chips, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying that on air. But that is disturbing to me that, you had PG&E up there. You had all these things, this debris being taken away.
Yes.
Like, oh, we're rebuilding, we're starting over. And it sounds a lot like 9/11.
It does.
And they went right in and just...
And I think the other thing that was so startling for me is the human resource and equipment resource allocation to that fire just seemed so much greater than any sort of aid or help that went out to the victims.
Yeah.
It was exponentially greater.
Yeah.
And that just struck me as...
And when you
Not
drive
right.
along, as you've probably seen when you're driving along, I mean, you see tree after tree after tree along the utility lines, big ones and unburned ones. We're talking 4 or 5 foot diameter, some of them ponderosas, that are being taken out. I mean, on people's private property.
Right.
And being taken out and being sent, I don't know where, but we're talking thousands and thousands of board feet of good lumber that's all being extracted before residents were even able to come back and check on their place.
One of the properties that Matt and I looked at and gathered forensic evidence on there was 2 different things that had gone on there. One was a tree notice of their intent to remove any damaged trees on the property. Okay, that's one. And the other one was hazardous materials. Okay, so they had tagged this as, okay, you're clear, you're cleared of hazardous materials, and they drug all of these, steel fuel cans and 5-gallon paint cans or whatever was in them, in 1-gallon cans. They drug all this stuff out and marked it with an X, and then, they'd been inside of where what was left of the structure inside these people's private property, sorting through for all of this.
And the back to the cutting of all the trees. And it's like, question, why are they doing that? Why are they cutting all these big trees down? They weren't affected in the fire. They know that. Why? And then you hear about 5G.
Right.
And one witness we talked to one of the PG&E crews, and he had mentioned that 5G, he was told that 5G was going to be going in up there. And 5G, when you learn about it, it is high frequency, but it's affected by obstructions. So if there's big trees in the way, then that's going to affect it. So makes you wonder, is this...
And 5G is coming. They don't make any bones about it.
Nope.
I just heard
Whether
that...
we want it or not.
Whether we want it or not. No opting out, right? No
Right.
opting out. We can opt out the smart meter, but 5G. I just heard that they were talking about, mainstream media was talking about not rebuilding Paradise after all, because it's, too dangerous. There's just remember these diet lanes they made? There were 4-lane roads, and then they turned it into 2-lane roads right through Skyway. Mm-hmm. And the question was, what if there's an emergency and people can't get out, or there's an emergency vehicle and you have these 2-lane highways, and so now there's this talk about, only having one way in and one way out of these mountain homes is dangerous. I don't think it's smart for us to rebuild with all the insurance costs that's going to cost us to rebuild. Now they're talking about scrapping the whole deal, and supposedly all these displaced people will not have a place to return to, which sounds even further fishy to me. What are your thoughts, or have you heard anything on that?
I don't know. I guess time will tell what the real agenda is.
Right.
We'll see what...
I would comment that we have the experience of actually going through the NorCal fires, the Tubbs Fire, and the related NorCal fires. And the type of help that I saw those people receive would be what I would expect now, and which was next to nothing. They buying people out, offering them a bunch of cash just to walk away.
Yeah.
Disclose weird stuff like disclosure statements for Israel. Weird stuff.
Wow.
And then I think that a lot of people may be on the hook for their mortgage, and that the insurance companies probably are.
Well,
One of them went bankrupt already.
it's an opportunity to, if you are going to build, you're going to be jumping through the new building hoops.
Right,
The new
and then
smart
it
standards.
could potentially be cost prohibitive, don't you think?
Well, I think time will tell. I mean, if time will tell what the ultimate agenda is, I think of, if they let people go back, how create enough loopholes to jump through or enough expense, then we'll see. I think we'll see. So it's interesting listening to what you were saying, but I think time will tell. And if they don't let people back in there, what are they going to do to the people whose houses didn't burn? Are
They sure have been hinting about that, haven't they? That we got to change our thinking on this. And
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and through insurance companies, through not insuring, I mean, that's there's a lot of tools. If they don't want people to, they want to get rid of that community, there's a lot of tools at disposal.
Wow.
But this
That's
is all
amazing.
just speculation and all.
Yeah. We're almost done, believe it or not. We're starting to wrap up this whole show, and this show could go on for hours. It's just so much to cover, but I did want to say one thing just to kind of recap on the fire victims. We went into these centers, what do you call them?
Shelters.
These shelters, right? And Red Cross shelters. And we just didn't see the evidence of people there. It was mind-blowing. And I know we covered that briefly, but I want to make sure we touched on that. So these people there may not be enough people to rebuild up there after all. I mean, and this might be another just disguise of, hey, we can't rebuild, it's too dangerous. And I know that's my own opinion, guys, I'm speculating. But, with all this devastation and so much, one of the things I always want to talk about is solutions. What can we do to protect ourselves, inform ourselves? And I always want to give people, hey, here's the good news. We've given you all this bad news to wake you up not to wake you up, but to give you eyes to see of what might be happening below the surface, as we dig down the rabbit hole. Could either of you talk about some, go ahead.
I'm going to start because I'm going to let John do the conclusion and his solution, but I want to just start by, the only reason that I'm here, that my biggest goal is just to try to help wake people up to what's really going on. A lot of what I've said and what John said probably going to sound crazy to a lot of people. And, we are just two retired firefighters who, had no problems throughout our career. We did a good job. We were kind of leaders in our organizations. And we have both come to the same conclusion, and it's all been evidence-based. It's all been evidence-based. We both have a desire to find out the truth. And so I am just trying to wake people up. Everything that I've said, and you look up directed energy weapons, I don't know exactly what happened. We're trying to guess what happened. But these fires are nothing like any of the fires that I went on my whole career. And I think you would agree.
yeah.
So I just wanted to get that out there, that everything we've said, when we're talking about directed energy weapons, when we're talking about geoengineering, all that can be looked up. All that technology does exist. How they used it, did they use it, all that, yes, that's speculation. But absent any other better explanations, I'm ready. I want to hear it. I want to hear what those better explanations are. So that's kind of where I am. I'm going to turn it over to John with the solutions.
Okay. Yeah, I get to where I'm talking about this stuff and I'm thinking about the victims, and my heart breaks. It just breaks in two. It's like, I believe that a lot more people were killed than is being reported, and these people had just been so adversely affected, the ones that did survive, and they're going to be put through this bureaucratic hell, aren't they, Matt? Hi, we're here from the government, and we're here to help. So It's just unbelievable. So thanks, Matt. What can people do? We always like to end it on a positive note. Some of this stuff we're talking about is really deep and really heavy, and people, I think it's bred into Americans to want to help. So people do want to get involved. So the one I always start with is pray. Pray for the victims, pray for those that were lost, pray for the people that lost property, pray for them all. And families have literally been ripped apart. So pray. Pray long, pray hard. And for the people that did survive this fire, and I would give the same advice to the Southern California fire victims, network. Develop networks. Start to figure out where your peeps are, your neighbors, your co-workers. Start to figure and build lists. And those groups I would highly recommend. Obviously they would take some leadership to set up, but make them so they're more of a leaderless group. Can you agree on that, Matt?
Yeah.
Just make it so that anybody in the group could pick up the ball and run it.
But we need to take care of each other. We need
Right,
to take
we need
care
to
of
take
each
care of
other,
each
and
other.
we have to. That's why the more we wake up to what's really going on, then we realize that we need to have a network of friends and hopefully like-minded people that understand the bigger picture of what's going on.
Yeah. So, and share experiences. We always used to be able to go back to the firehouse and kind of defuse from, heavy calls there just by being around each other and talking about it. But share your experiences with other people and also your knowledge, So, and fight. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever give up hope, no matter how dismal it seems. And this one here is pretty important. It's a little bit sensitive of an area to talk about, so I'm just going to remove all sensitivity and just spit it out, okay? If you're looking to help out the victims, please look for sources, for avenues to help out the victims financially, that where the money's actually going to get to them. Because we've seen in this nation that the amount of money that gets donated to Red Cross after a huge disaster like this, there is a fraction of the money that actually gets back to the victims. So look for viable sources to donate and try to help out that way. I don't really have. I know Jamie's.
Yes, Jamie seems like he's been doing a great job with that, of taking 100% that comes in and giving it. He's shown evidence and videos of it with you. That's great. That's excellent.
So that Jamie's site is A Plain Truth. So, and that's the only other one that I've seen so far. But there's bound to be others out there. But anyway, look for viable sources. Don't donate to Red Cross. It'll never get to them. And spread the word about this stuff.
Well,
spread the word
and do your own research. Please don't believe us. Don't take our word for any of this. We are coming up with our best guess, our best conclusions based on our research. Do your own research. Things are not normal. They're not as the narrative that's being put out there by mainstream is not the truth. So please do your research in all areas.
It'll mean a lot more.
Yeah.
It'll mean a lot more to you if you do your own research. Obviously, I don't do any research at all. You just can see one of my bookshelves over the back of me.
Do you have any other questions for us? Shelley?
Yeah, so I wanted to just, not really any more questions, just thank you guys so much for being a beacon of light out in this world that's dark. Because we can all get distracted by things of just normal everyday life that we don't have the time to kind of look into here, look into there, and so it's people like you who are shedding this light for others, really. And even though it may fall on deaf ears, just know that we're seed planters and that we're trying to help as many people as we can get the word out there. So I just want to thank you guys so much for what you've done. And I know I went on one of these excursions. I didn't get to go inside Paradise, but you know, you were there. You saw so much, and thank you for being eyes and ears for those of us who didn't get to see some of the devastation inside of there. And you're such a voice for the victims. I mean, they don't get their say. They don't get to tell their story. And so for them, you know, this is going to probably be, a really bad memory for a lot of people. Remember Paradise, but, you know, a lot of their family members are grieving and hurting, and they want to know the truth. They want to know. And so thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your stories and your expertise and just being able to talk about it. This is huge for us, and I'm just really thankful. We have about 5 more minutes if there's anything else you guys want to conclude with. Otherwise, we'll turn it over to some commercial breaks.
I got an idea.
What?
Let's the three of us pray.
Okay.
How's that?
All right. Do you want to lead us?
I'll lead it.
Okay,
I'll do
John.
that. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the many blessed relationships that we have, our family, our friends, for the many, many blessings that you bring us. Lord, we send our love out to the victims of the fire, those lost, and those people who are still suffering, and all of the other disasters that are going on across the nation. And we ask you, Lord, to pick up those people's spirits, and so that they don't lose hope, and provide for them. And Lord, we ask that if there are people that are intentionally using these technologies to harm others, we ask that you expose them or strike them down into hell, into the depths of hell, Lord. We thank you, Lord, for hearing our prayer. Amen.
Thank you guys so much. And on that note, we are going to continue this Paradise Fire coverage as long as we have breath in our lungs. So next week we'll get into some more of the photographs. I'm going to be compiling together a YouTube of this interview, as well as overlaying a lot of photographs talked about during this presentation. And so definitely stay tuned, guys. You're listening to ferlive.com, Down the Rabbit Hole with Shelley Lewis. I'll see you guys next week, virtually, of course, and we will talk more and more about hot topics such as the Paradise Fires and the directed energy weapons and smart meters, and how we can actually get more informed, as well as 5G. That's coming, all right? So I know I said, 5G, what can we do? I want to give you guys some serious answers to that and some solutions. And so, John, Lord, and Matt, thank you guys so much again for coming on our show.
Thanks for the opportunity, Shelley.
Yeah,
Thanks
you
for the
guys-
opportunity.
Thank you guys so much. All right, see you guys later. Bye.